Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sabbath School. And if you are following along online, we welcome you too. Now, we have way more people here this week than we did last week at any time. We had 15 people last week, but we had 45 people online. So we had a total of 60. That was not bad at all for Sabbath school. But anyways, we're glad you're here and glad that, well, I was out every single day last week, but on either Monday or Tuesday, I was in the grocery line, and I heard this lady ahead of me saying to the cashier, "This is the first day I've been out since it first started snowing." Okay, well, I was out every day in it, but that's all right. Glad you're here. And like the pastor said in his little note that he emailed most everybody, if you don't feel comfortable, don't come. But We live on a private road, so nobody plows it. Actually, Rita and I plowed it. We were the first vehicle to go through anything. So we went down our road, came back up it. But anyways, if a person does feel at all unsure, they ought not to be out in it. But we had no problems at all, either coming or going. So, let's have a word of prayer, and then we're going to get right into the study of the lesson. Father in heaven, I pray that you would be with us now as we discuss this week's lesson. I pray for Patrick today. He is an agnostic. He doesn't know. We had quite a talk this week, and I pray that you would work on his heart, show him things that he needs to see and understand, and be with us as we study, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we're going to start with Luke 15. And let me just say a few words about it as you're turning to Luke 15. Luke 15 has 3 parables in it, which all teach the same lesson. That's one way of looking at it. Some people say Luke 15 is one parable with emphasis in 3 different areas. Either way, very similar, the 3 parables in it. It starts out with the tax collectors and sinners all gathering around to hear him. Who's the him? Jesus. Tax collectors and sinners gathering around to hear Jesus. Have you ever felt that you were too sinful to pray? I got good news for you. The Lord likes to hang around with sinners and tax collectors. So while the sinners and tax collectors are listening to Jesus, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law are muttering. This man welcomes sinners and even eats with them. Oh, mercy. So with that background, Jesus tells the 3 parables in Luke 15. The first one we call the parable of the lost sheep. The second one we call the parable of the lost coin. The third one I call the parable of the lost son. And then we could go on to one more thing, and that's the older brother. Now, in the parable of the lost sheep, how long does the good shepherd search for the lost sheep? Say it again. Is that a few minutes? Is that a few hours? Is that a day? Who knows? Who cares? He searches until he finds it. That's the point. Why? You've heard a lot of people say the wrong answers. Let's get the right one. Why is he so intent on finding the lost sheep? It is not money. You sometimes heard preachers try to make out like that's what it is. No, it isn't. Any of you ever owned a business? If you have a 1% loss in your business, is that significant? It could be, but usually no. Usually you're going to figure a 5% loss minimum, and often more than that. We had a store once upon a time in New York, so I understand how much loss you can take, but a 1% loss is not considered anything. You got to get up to 5 or more percent before you even begin to feel it. In the parable, the man had 100 sheep, he lost 1. 1% loss. No, forget it. It's not worth it. No, the good shepherd goes and finds him, not because of the monetary value. That is not it. He goes to find him because he knows something about sheep. They are helpless. And when they get lost, they can't find their way back. And if he doesn't find that sheep, it will be the prey for something out there that will get it and that'll be the end of that sheep. So because of his love for that being, that sheep, he goes out and searches till he finds it. All right, the lost coin. Does the lost coin know it's lost? No idea. Could care less. It's just a coin. Probably a denarii, a day's wage. I don't remember what a day's wage is now, and I didn't look it up, and I should have. What's a typical day's wage for a working person? Anybody got any idea? $160? Okay, that's a good one. $160. Some of you are saying, I'd love to make $160 a day, and others of you are saying, I couldn't live if I only got $160. But anyways, let's just take that as a figure. $160. That's what that coin was worth. It was lost. How long did the woman look for that coin? What was that? Until she found it. Again, there was no time limit. She searched for that coin until she found it. This is actually the only place I can think of in the Bible where God is represented by a woman searching for a lost coin. $160 coin. Yeah, I think I'd search for it too. Because of the monetary value of it, because of the monetary value only, she searches until she finds it. Get the contrast between the first two parables? Now let's look at the third one. We'll need a reader, Dan. And you will read Luke 15:11 to the end of the chapter. And I will stop you frequently. Okay, Joy, thank you for volunteering so readily.
Now all the tax collectors and the sinners were coming near him.
Okay, go to verse 11 through 32, please.
I was going to get the beginning. And he said, a man had two sons. A younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of my estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth between them. Okay, now we got to understand, in those days, when would a child get his inheritance? At the death of the father.
At the death of the father. But the old man hasn't died yet. So the younger son says, in essence, look, you're still alive, but let's pretend that you're dead, because I want my share of the inheritance now. What does the father do? He gives him what he wants. There's two sons. And according to the rules of those days, the older one gets a double portion, the rest gets a single portion. So the father divides his property into three parts, gives 2 parts to the older son, and 1 part to the younger son. The younger son does not complain about that. He understands the laws of the time. So he gets his third. Okay, keep going.
And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into the distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living.
Okay. Now we could guess what that might involve. But does it actually say it? It just says he wasted his inheritance with wild living, with loose living. It doesn't really say what he does, except that he wastes it. That's going to become important later on. Okay, keep going, please.
Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine.
Now wait a minute. This boy is a Jewish boy. Where does the man send him?
Feed the pigs.
To feed the pigs. A Jewish boy feeding pigs? Oh man, doesn't he have some cattle he can take care of, or sheep, or something besides pigs? He sends him to feed pigs. Oh, mercy. But keep going, it gets worse.
And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving him anything to.
Okay, what are the pods that the swine were eating? Somebody said it. Carob. Carob pods. Anybody like carob? 2 people. Anyone not like? No, I won't even ask that one. That's obvious. Carob. Carob pods. Oh, it's a bean. It's a member of the bean family. And the beans come in these pods, and they take it up and they mash it and make it into something that pretends to be chocolate, which is not chocolate at all, but anyways. So that's what he's eating, these pods. That's what the pigs are eating, these pods. And he wishes he could fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. And I'll tell you right now, folks, when pig slop looks good to you, you got a problem. And this boy has a problem. That pig slop looks good to him. Boy, I wish I could jump in there with my fork and just fill myself up. Oh, boy. Okay, Sister Joy, please.
This and said, "How many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I'm dying here with hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men.' So he got up and came to his father."
Okay, now, when did all this happen? What's the first line of verse 17?
When he came to his senses.
When he came to his senses. When he woke up and realized he's sitting there wishing he could join the pigs in eating the pig slop. He needed to look up. Get his mind out of the garbage that the pigs were eating. And suddenly he realized how stupid he had been. His money's gone. The third of the inheritance he got, it's all gone. And here he is feeding pigs and wishing he could eat with them. And so look at what he says to himself. I'll say to my father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, he wasn't worthy. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. But look at the very next verse, or next line, Joy, please.
But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him, and ran and embraced him and kissed him.
All right. It says here, while he was still a long way off, and we kind of picture the old man sitting on the front porch and looking down the road, and he sees this person coming, and he realizes it's his son. Now, it wasn't really that way. The word here for still a long way off is the same word for the boy went into a far country. The father sees him even in the far country, even when he's doing every stupid thing he can think of to do to waste money. That's how far the father saw him. He had compassion for him. He ran. He's an old man. Old men have no business running. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him. He smells like a pig. He looks like a pig. Threw his arms around him and kissed him. The father remembers his speech. Go ahead, Joy.
And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.
Does he complete his speech? The one he had
Nope.
planned? No, he ends it right in the middle. Why? Because the father doesn't want to hear anymore. I am no longer worthy to be called your son, he says. Look at how the father puts it. Verse 22.
But the father said to the slaves, quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him.
Whose robe is that?
That would have been his.
The father's robe. He smells like a pig. He looks like a pig. Take my best robe and put it on him. I don't want anyone to see him looking like a pig. Cover him up with my robe. Oh boy, the symbolism there is overwhelming. But keep going.
And he put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet.
The ring on the hand was a ring of authority. It's kind of like a signature. It's the father's ring, but the son has it now. Put shoes on his feet or sandals on his feet. Slaves go barefoot. Sons wear shoes. Put shoes on his feet. Keep going.
And bring the fattened calf, kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and he has been found. And they began to celebrate.
Well, I certainly know the first part of verse 24. This son of mine is dead. I haven't experienced the second part, and is alive again. But this father felt his son was dead. Dead in his sins and in his misery and in his embarrassment. But now he's alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Now, if the parable ended there, we'd say, what a fantastic ending to a great story. Doesn't end there.
No.
Goes the other direction. Okay, verse 25 onward.
Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he summoned up one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound.
Okay, now how should the older brother feel?
Rejoice.
How does he feel?
Angry.
Why?
So this is where the struggle begins for me. So I have three brothers. Both of them are younger. If I were to stay behind and work while my brothers went off and did whatever, it would be very difficult for me to understand the idea that they could come back. In the earthly sense, it's not possible for me to find a way to be happy that he's back. He wished, Dad, that you were dead. As I was reading this and thinking how you were, because we've had this a little bit once before, the idea of the brother to want his father dead, because that's what it came down to, to get that, his monetary value. But you said something earlier, and I didn't catch this until today, just now, when you talked about the other two, the lost sheep and then the coin. It dawned on me, the sheep does have a monetary value. I mean, sheep are stupid. I've gotten to hang around them. I agree. You definitely want to go find them before they go do something dumb, like fall into a pit or whatever. The coin, I get it. It's a monetary value. This story talks about the son right now leaving, taking a monetary value and giving, just destroying it. But out of all those three things, I recognize in this story that we all here have monetary value at a level that I don't know that I caught on to until not too long ago, because of the price that was paid for us. It's very difficult, I think, though, to comprehend if we're stuck in this world's view.
And I appreciate that, Glon, because you do have younger brothers, and you do know how you would feel if you were the older brother in the story. That makes sense to me. Ted.
When my father died, he had cut my sister and brother out of the will completely. My youngest sister and I were the total inheritance. My youngest sister was the executrix. Family dynamics are so complicated.
Yep.
My youngest sister was the executrix. It was going to include my younger brother, but not my younger sister.
Ooh.
I convinced her to include everyone, and out of that came some healing in the family. To leave them out completely, I mean, what would he have the older brother do, you know? What would the older brother do if the father had died?
Yeah.
And he was there and the son came home. Would he say, get out?
Probably.
You know,
Probably.
What did he expect his father to do when his son came home? That was something I was wondering.
Okay. And by the way, notice how the first two parables began. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep. Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins. This one, there was a man who had 2 sons. Totally different beginning. We're out of the realm of speculation now. We're talking about children. And that's a whole nother story. Matt.
Well, also in so many places in the story of the prodigal son, there's a lot of behavior that back then was considered very scandalous. You have the son saying, you're dead to me, I want what's mine. You're dead to me, I don't want nothing to do with you, you're gone. And then you have, you know, the way he lived, which is very scandalous, and I've ran down that road before. It don't take long to go through a lot of money real fast. I mean, it can go within a month. Then you have the father who sees him, and then the story, it says the father took off running. You know, the master of the household didn't run nowhere.
No?
So, I mean, and then, you know, he does so much for his son to bring him back. And it's, like I said, the behavior, so many points in there was considered scandalous at the time.
Yeah.
But Jesus used that to emphasize how important it is that everyone comes back to him, that God himself will do what's considered scandalous because it means that much to him when you return.
And remember that the father even saw the younger son when he was in the far country. The sheep didn't know how to get back. The coins certainly didn't know how to get found. But the son does.
To that, though, also, multiple things in that parable, when you say it that way, God never leaves us at all. He's constantly watching. All of us are brothers and sisters, whether we like it or not, actually. And this parable screams out to me, regardless of whether you're my best friend or my worst enemy, if you come to God, I need to rejoice, because that is something above any earthly thing we could talk about.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Well, you have to go back and just, I guess, look into the mind of Jesus as to why he told these parables to the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were calling these people outcast, and Jesus was looking for the lost and to try to bring them back into the fold, to restore the coin, to restore the son. So when you look at it that way, this is the reason that he told them. It was just an illustration to them. You are here doing God's work. Well, they probably were not doing God. The Pharisees probably were not doing God's work.
But they should have been.
They were there, and why would they be jealous of Jesus trying to seek the lost?
That's the message of the parable. Go ahead, Joy. Let's go on at verse 20-something, 28, onward.
But he became angry and was not willing to go in. His father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his father,
Listen to the
"Look,
words of the older son now.
look, what so many years I have been serving you, and I have never neglected a command of yours.
Do you think
And
that's
yet
true?
you have never given me a young goat
Hang
so
on.
that I might..."
Do you think that's true that he never disobeyed his orders?
No.
I'm sure there were times he did. He was human. I'm sure there were times he did. And look at what he says. I've been slaving for you. Who owns the farm? At this point in the story, who owns the farm?
The father,
He's already given it away. Who owns the farm?
the older
The
son.
older son owns the farm. He hasn't been slaving for anyone. He owns it all. He's got it all mixed up in his head. He still thinks he's a slave when he owns it all. Oh, mercy. I've been slaving for you all these years and never disobeyed your orders. I doubt that. Read it.
Which brings up a good point. We're all sinners, including the oldest son. And the youngest son recognizes it and pleads for a savior, which is what we all should be doing.
The younger son says, look, I'm not worthy to be called a son. Make me a slave. The older son says, I've been slaving all the... Oh, man, he has missed... His mind is not right. The younger son's mind wasn't right for a long time till he woke up. Well, the older son needs to wake up too. I've been slaving for you all these years, never disobeyed your orders. Pick it up there, please.
And yet you never given me a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends.
If he wants a goat, what can he do?
Take it.
It's his. He can butcher it whenever he wants and have a party. Keep going, please.
But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.
Now notice he says, this son of yours. Doesn't even acknowledge him as a brother. This son of yours. And how does he say he squandered the property? With prostitutes. Did the story say that's how he lost his money?
No.
Just says he wasted it on wild living. May have included prostitutes, but didn't necessarily have to. So where does the son get this notion about prostitutes? Because he knows how he would have used the money if he had been in that far country. Keep going, please, Joy.
And you killed the fattened calf for him.
Listen to the father's plea.
And he said to him, Son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours.
Now, do you understand that better now? All that I have is yours. He's already given him the farm. It belongs to the older son now. Everything I have is yours. He's telling the truth. Look at what he says next.
But we had to celebrate and rejoice, for your brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has been found.
The younger son was dead, the father says. Gives us some idea of how Jesus looks at our sinfulness. We're dead in sin in Jesus' eyes. He wants to bring us life. We're lost. He wants us found. Tremendous parable. Tremendous parable. Sunday's lesson says, what does the parable of the prodigal son reveal about God's compassion and love? What warning does it provide for those who, like the older son, remain at home? Now let's suppose that some scoundrel were to come into church today. How well would we receive him? That's for you to answer in your heart to God, not to me. Okay, we got to go on. So I need another reader. Oh, gone?
It's more a question / statement, I guess, to some degree, as we were reading this, and then I'm kind of trickled back into my thoughts of the wedding scene when God sends out everybody and brings everybody back in, but there's the one guy out there that he's looking through, and doesn't have the wedding garments on that was given him. So now I feel like this brother is kind of like that same guy. You were there, you had the abilities, you had everything you could possibly want. You just chose not to put the robe on.
There you go.
And it just kind of caught me off guard. I just didn't know. I guess the question is, does that actually kind of correlate between the two? But I guess it's also a statement. We better think about putting on the right clothing.
It's for sure. Jesus gave it to us. That's why I said, isn't it significant that the Father says, bring the best robe and put it on him? What does Jesus do for every one of us? Covers us with his robe of righteousness. Wow. Doctor.
But having been born and raised an Adventist, I can relate to the older brother a lot better than the younger brother. And I think it kind of, when you look at it, it isn't fair, right? That's not really justice. How is it fair that he can squander everything, do whatever he wants, and he comes back and he's okay? And it doesn't seem like it's justice. It doesn't seem fair, and it goes against everything that we would think. And so I think even when I look at my children, they have a sense like, it's not fair. I'm in this church. I can't do what I want to do. I'm missing out on the things that I would enjoy. Why can't I just go out in the world, enjoy it, and then come back later and be saved? And but I think the thing is, we have the skewed view of what it really is. We don't understand the blessing of being there. And instead, we look at it as bondage instead of freedom.
Yep.
And so we feel like we're missing out when the world has nothing to offer that God doesn't give us even better.
Absolutely.
But so often we look at it as, oh, they got to live in the world. Look at that person. He gives a testimony. He was a drug dealer. He did all this. He enjoyed his life. And now he's in the church and he's saved. And I was stuck in the church my whole life. I couldn't, play sports on Sabbath. What an unfair life.
Right? Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I think a lot of us feel that way at some point in time. Hopefully not all the time. But at some point in time, I think we do come to that same conclusion.
So as somebody who came into the church in years in, my mom and dad divorced. My mom was leaning in the Seventh-day Adventist thing, and I still had one foot in the world and one foot in the church door. So I hated getting up Saturday mornings, having to go to church and not watch my Saturday morning cartoons.
There we go.
I played football Friday evenings. I wrestled on the weekends. It's to say that I could appreciate your side as a guy coming in, because I know those feelings just as well. And I don't know if it makes me appreciate the church more, but I will fight hard when I hear somebody talk about the Sabbath, because it took me so long to get here. I've been told many times that when I have discussions, that I come across extremely defensive, but it's because I recognize what I lost, the time I lost now, and the struggles that I've had. I don't know that they're necessarily any different. Maybe we have a lot of the same struggles, but what we won't necessarily know. But we all should have the same goal.
Okay. And Matt?
Going to what Daniel was saying, I was more or less the younger brother.
Okay.
I lived that life. I know exactly what it's like. I know what it's like to wake up on Sabbath morning and have no idea how you got there. And you're like, what did I do the night before? And, and I see, that there's times the devil gets in my head and he starts making me think of some of the things I've done and how much more fun it would have been if I just went a little further and everything, trying to get me to think about that. And that's one thing I do admire about people that grew up in the Adventist church. They don't have those memories. They don't have that temptation. Hey, you did have a lot of fun doing this, because in the moment, yeah, you have a lot of fun. But when you come out of that moment,
When you wake up.
it is bad. It is very bad. And, it's... like I said, there's things I've probably done I have no memory of, and I don't even know if I could confess it. I know I've sinned. I don't know what I did, but I know I sinned.
And so what you're saying and what Dr. Kim is saying is there's some of us that would be able to identify right away with the older brother. There's some of us that could identify right away with the younger brother. That's why Jesus told a parable. He told it to the teachers of the law and the Pharisees. And in this parable, who are they? They're the older brother. They're the older brother. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Kind of going between Daniel and others. In education, you learn that you create little hooks of memories. And the side that the kids don't see are those scars that some of that experience leaves you. So they never go away. I kind of liken it to one time I watched a really scary movie. Somebody talked me into it. And to this day, those visions are in my head. I wish I never would have.
Yep.
And those experiences there touch you and really don't go away. They can be forgiven.
But there's
the
still a
memories are
scar there. That's a good perspective. All right, we need to go on. And Dan, I need a man to read this next portion.
Virginia.
Virginia has a comment. Okay.
No, she's got to read it.
No, you can't read it, Virginia. I need a man to read this next section. You can read the one after it, but not this one. Okay, this is going to be Ephesians 5, 25 through 28, and you got to be a man to read this. Ephesians 5, 25 to 28. Who's reading?
Dwayne.
Okay, Brother Dwayne.
I know you can.
Ephesians 5, 25 to 28. We know this by heart, don't we? But go ahead, read it, please.
Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself.
All right. Now I see why I had to have a man read it. A husband even read it. I happen to think that my wife is the most beautiful woman in the world. I don't care if anybody agrees with me or doesn't agree with me. That's my feeling. But this line, he who loves his wife loves himself. Oh boy. I have problems with that one. Do you have problems with it too? Go ahead. What do you have to say?
Well, it goes back to what Brother Kim said. So there is a jealousy factor, Brother Kim, because I think that your time in the Seventh-day Adventist Church led you on a more healthier path. Now, I don't know this because I don't know you well enough, but that scripture is very troubling for me because, one, I didn't know what it meant to love myself. I didn't have that character built in yet. My mom and dad divorced when I was a kid, so I didn't have that example. So there's a big jealousy factor because, yeah, I did get to watch Saturday morning cartoons or go with my dad to a swap meet or play football or wrestle. But as a man now, a divorced man, the scripture is haunting. It's only recently that I've learned to love myself.
Interesting.
And but it's still very difficult because Satan has that hook. He knows how to yank me out just enough.
Yeah.
So I say this with all respect. Put yourself in the lucky column, because playing football and wrestling, watching Saturday morning cartoons, now, knowing what I know, I would have loved to I want to redo. I would love to. I want to do over, because I would love to find that I tell my kids, please learn from my mistakes for the love of God. I'm not happy with any of the things that I did in my past. It's these last 3 to 4 years that God has just grabbed hold of me and said, it's going to be okay. Look at all these great things. And you should have known about it, but here you are now, and take it.
You missed the boat, but that's all right. All right, we're going to go right on to the last one, because I'm looking at the time. We have a hand over here. Let's see. We need to decide, are we going to let her speak? Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Please. I just had to after listening to that, because I am pretty sure that everyone in this room can resonate with what you just said. I'm divorced as well, and I was definitely lost after it, and I questioned my worth and my value. And similar to you, I think it's been a struggle to find love within myself, and hearing stories of other people who may not have felt that or experienced that, there is a sense of jealousy and resentment. But what God can do for someone else, he can do for you, right? And that's the quarterly that we're on, is God is love and just. So it sucks, right? For sure. Because you have to rebuild your character. You have to learn to love yourself and allow God to love yourself, because at the end of the day, we can't do that on our own. And I've tried, to find that love, right? And it just is never enough. Never. So for me, and this is still something that I'm working towards, but allowing God to fulfill my needs and to just to be invited into my life. And even on during times that I struggle with loving myself, I say a prayer in my head. I'm like, God, just fill these parts of myself that I'm struggling to love, because I have even to convince myself and to add a ton of faith into this, because at the end of the day, like I said, what he can do for someone else, he can definitely do for you. And when we get to that point, everything else that we didn't get or that we lacked, it'll just be wiped away, because God is love and he's just. And but I love everything that was said today, so I just had to add that.
I'm certainly glad I gave you a chance to speak. Matt, put your hand down. I'll recognize you in a little bit. Now, folks, be honest. Be honest. Raise your hand if you've been divorced. You're not the only one. There's a whole bunch of us. I've been divorced. I know what it's like. Who said it's hard? It is hard. It's impossibly hard. And if a person hasn't been there, they don't know what it's like. And those of us that have been there, we do know what it's like. So I appreciate what you had to say. Okay, Matt, now we'll listen to you.
Going to what he had said just a minute ago, how, he wished he could have a do-over. Now, I know a lot of people say, I wish I could have done this different, I wish I could have done that different. I'm glad I did everything the way I did, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't change it for anything, because if I could change it, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I wouldn't have the faith that I have today, and I wouldn't have the walk that I have with the Lord today. So I'm glad I did everything that I did, and I got to see exactly how far Jesus would reach down to grab somebody.
All right, and that is a marvelous thing. Rita, wait for the phone, wait for the microphone. I almost called it a telephone. Here it is.
I am just so grateful that everything I did is a testimony now. It is something, when I was in my 20s, I went to teenagers at a junior high and told them what hell was. I was able to do what I couldn't do if I had not have been there. So thank God I went to hell. I hate that sound of what it sounds like, but it taught me how to teach these kids what drinking, what drugs, what if your parents don't love you the way you want them to, it don't mean a thing. What means something is reach out for Jesus. Like I said, I'm 70 years old and God's still using me to witness, testify, and defend for his precious name.
And I remember vividly when you came up here and gave your testimony.
Yes.
So you've been one of those that have had that opportunity.
Yes, I have.
Okay, I'm going to finish this up
Jesus.
quickly by going through Mark 9, just a portion of it with you. Let's just set the scene. Mark 9 starts out with the transfiguration. Peter, James, and John up on the mountain with Jesus, and he's transfigured. Comment.
I'm just going to say, you got to stop trying to do things yourself. Because when my first wife walked out, our daughter that we had just adopted, little baby, left me with her, which I'm glad she did. She kept me. It was a load to put on a child.
Yeah.
But then I tried doing things and myself. It didn't work. I just quit. Next thing I know, Sandy's in my life. You want to know Daniel Revelation?
Yep.
And her father had a career.
Yeah.
Consequently, after 31 years, I'm down here, everything worked out, and I'm sorry I tried doing things myself. You just got to stop trying to do it yourself.
You're right. All right, let's look at Mark 9. Transfiguration has just taken place. Jesus and Peter, James, and John are coming down from the mountain. And when they get down to the bottom, there's a large crowd there around the rest of the disciples. Jesus, in verse 16, says to the crowd, "What are you arguing with them about?" Meaning the disciples. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." Shame on them, but they couldn't. Jesus says, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion, fell to the ground, rolled around, foaming at the mouth. And look at what Jesus says while all this is going on. How long has he been like this? This is the only time in the Gospels when Jesus does anything like that. Here this poor guy is rolling around on the ground. And Jesus calmly says, how long has he been like this? The father says, from childhood. And he's getting a little irritated now because look at his next statement. It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. If you can do anything. Remember when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness? How did those temptations begin? If you can do this, if you can do that. And it's back. If you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. Does Jesus hear that? Loud and clear, because look at his first words. If you can, everything is possible for him who believes. And now the Father comes to his senses, realizes how foolish he's been. He says, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a dead corpse that many said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, this kind can come out only by prayer. What an incredible story. Right after the transfiguration, a miniature of the second coming of Jesus, Jesus comes off the mountaintop down into the valley and is confronted with this. Now, it says here on Thursday's lesson, how does God respond to the man in the story? Well, we read it. How much faith is enough faith? You ever think about that? How much faith is enough faith? I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. The man realized he had a problem. And he reached out to Jesus to help him overcome his problem.
The scripture that talks about having the faith of a mustard seed. And if you've ever seen how small one of those are, but the faith that the man had by saying, I believe, help me with my unbelief, that measure of faith right there is so thin in my thinking because of his earlier comment, if you can,
right.
As if, I don't know.
I doubt you can, but maybe.
Yeah, I'm here on a hunch kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And then when Jesus kind of rebukes him, I guess is the best way to say that, he recognizes and the switch turns on. It's like, what a fool I am. I wouldn't have brought him here if I didn't believe. Of course I believe, but help me with my unbelief. That's kind of how I took that story.
And I lived in North Dakota many years ago, and I remember going to Bill DeSenko's ranch one time, and there was a whole bunch of grain, maybe it's on the floor. Anyways, he began to pick up the different bits of grain on the floor and hand them to me, and he would tell me, this one is so-and-so, and this one is so-and-so, and this is that, and this is the other thing. Pretty soon I got all these little bits of grain on my hand, and he's told me what each one is. Then he picks up this tiny black thing the size of a piece of salt, but it's black. Puts it in my hand, and he says, that's a mustard seed. Then I understood what it says if you have faith like the grain of mustard seed. And when we were studying this week, Rita commented on the faith like the grain of mustard seed. In other words, the Lord is looking for us to look to Him for our faith. On our own, no, we're not going to develop it, but He can.
So we look at the Father and we say, what a lack of faith. But you also have to remember that the disciples had tried and failed, and their actions probably weakened His faith.
Yep.
And I think that's true. We have an influence on those who don't believe. Our faith, our behaviors can affect others and either strengthen their faith or weaken it as well.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. All right, I want to read just one on Fridays. We don't have time to go through these, but just think about it. What might it mean to unselfishly receive? What do you think the relationship of giving and receiving will be like in heaven and in the new earth? Giving, receiving in a perfect environment. Wow. Anybody online have anything to say, Rita? No? Okay. Yes.
With that question, I was just thinking about, in heaven and the new earth, that when you're gifted something, or when you give something, I'll say, it's kind of like our instinct, like, oh, I was given something, so I've got to give something in return. But you won't have that thought. When you give, it will just be out of pure joy and happiness to give. And you will never expect anything in return.
No?
And that will just go back and forth kind of just naturally. And I think about the relationship with God, that what He wants of us for our happiness and for our health and for our joy is to follow His plan, to obey His commands. And we shouldn't do that expecting blessings. We should do that just trusting that we'll be blessed as a natural consequence of following His plan, because His ways are the best.
And did we read even the title of this week's lesson? To be pleasing to God. We want God to bless us. Can you imagine us being a blessing to God? Wow. Okay, it's time to close, so I will have prayer and we will close our study. Father in heaven, we've looked at a couple of parables today. We have related especially to the first one. We've seen ourselves not as the hero. We've seen ourselves in all the ugliness that we possess. And yet, despite that, you love us, you value us, you keep searching for us until you find us. Thank you for that, Lord. And be with us now as we go into the next service, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
The problem Albert had was he had his hand over the end. That's what it was. And I almost was going to move it up. I hate to be rude.
I almost shut the green. It was just completely covered. And he had it down low where it has to go through all the chairs.